Shalom. This is the last video of the day, and this is going to be on this week's Sedra. This week's Sedra is an amazing Sedra. It's one of the most popular in the Torah, and although you might not be so familiar with it, I'm hoping this video gives you just a small taste, and that'll really enlighten you and want you to go further and in greater exploration. The Sedra this week is the Sedra of Ki Tisa. Ki Tisa. And what it has is, it has two massive first aliyot. We know every Sedra is divided into 7 aliyot. The first two are huge, and the reason why the first two are huge is because the second is the story of the golden calf. And our rabbis in their great wisdom wanted to include that entire story in one section so as not to spread this tragedy of the Jewish people. The golden calf was a tremendous tragedy of ours, and spread them out into many different aliyot. We wanted to start it, get it done, and get past it and move past it. It's a tragedy, and unfortunately that's not what we're going to be studying this morning. We're going to be learning about something much different, and I hope you gain to appreciate it. But the idea is we're going to be looking at is the idea of what exactly the building of the Mishkan, the building of the tabernacle, was all about. Now, if you remember, in the desert, we were commanded to build a tabernacle. Tabernacles like this big massive tent with curtains that hang over as a roof, and it was constructed and taken apart every time Bnei Israel traveled. Right? The fire would stop that was leading them. Bnei Israel would stop where they were. They would rebuild the Mishkan. Then, if we saw the fire started going again, they would take apart the Mishkan and rebuild it. It was this huge tent that could fit really thousands upon thousands of people inside. It was a massive tent, and the primary purpose of this tent was to gather the people around it, where Moshe Rabbeinu would teach outside the tent, but inside is where the Kohanim would do the service, and we find ourselves in these last couple of Sedra in Sefer Shemot, we find the building of the Mishkan and the inauguration of the Mishkan. Now, this Sedra begins by talking about the Machasis shekel, the half shekel that was collected by Moshe Rabbeinu to count the Jewish people. We have a prohibition. I'm not sure if you know this. Everybody has heard of it, but we have a prohibition of counting the Jewish people. There's an idea behind it and why we don't count the Jewish people and why right? But how were they able to take a census of the Jewish people? How are they able to know? If you can't go around and count, how are you able to know how many people the Jewish people have? Very simple. They would collect a half a shekel from everybody. You add up all the half shekels, you see how much you have, and that's how many people there are. That was the way that we were able to know how many people there were. Now, what did all this money go to? Now that we've collected this huge tax, half a shekel is not the half a shekel today. That would be worth about 12 cents. The half a shekel then was made out of silver. It was a certain weight in silver. It was quite valuable, actually, and it was a tax. That tax went to buy the utensils needed and the animals needed for the Mishkan. And later on, when we got to Israel and we stopped using this temporary Mishkan, we built the Beit HaMikdash. Now, the Sedra begins with the instructions of how to build a kior. A kior, okay? A kior. It's interesting. What a kior is it's a dish. If you ever seen like a coffee urn, right, where they keep coffee and you go over to the machine and you open it up and the coffee comes in. So it's like a coffee urn, but instead it rested on the ground, and the Kohanim would wash their hands and their feet. It had many different lavers, many different almost like faucets all around. And the Kohanim, what they would do is, I would show you if the video camera could capture it, but even if I move back you can't see it. But the idea is that the Kohanim would bend over and they would rest their hands, their fingers, on their toes. And then they would turn on the spigot that came out of the kior, and water would wash their hands and their feet. And that's what the kior was. Now, there was no real avoda, there was no service in washing their hands and their feet. It wasn't like that was a service to God. Right? Prayer is a service to God. A korban is a service to God. Those are actual services to God. Those are mitzvah commands that we have to service God. That's a korban. That's burning. If it's incense, the ketores. If it's pouring wine, that's an actual avodah. Here, what you had is the kior was used to wash the Kohanim's feet and hands before they went to do the service, before they went to give a korban. That's different than an avodah, okay? And the Sforno separates between the two things built for use in the Mishkan. He has one that was directly for service, and something else was not for avoda, not for actual service, but to get the Kohanim ready. And we see this is a fact in life. There are many things that are used not for actual benefit, but to get us to the point of a benefit. Right? And there's in halachic terms, that's called a hechsher mitzvah. A hechsher mitzvah is not an actual mitzvah, but it's something of secondary importance that allows us to do the actual mitzvah. Okay, so right, I give you, and I don't want to don't make light of hechsher mitzvah. In fact, the hechsher mitzvah, the preparation, the Gemara, the Yerushalmi. Right, we have a Talmud Bavli and we have a Talmud Yerushalmi. The Talmud Bavli goes on to say that we make a bracha on Hechsher Mitzvah. Now, we don't hold that way. We don't make a bracha on Hechsher Mitzvah. We only make a bracha on a mitzvah in and of itself. Right? Hechsher Mitzvah, we don't make a bracha on. But let me give you some examples in today, practically, of a Hechsher Mitzvah. The most obvious one, the most familiar one, is building a sukkah. We have a mitzvah on the first night of Sukkot to live in the sukkah. Right? But we have no mitzvah to build a sukkah. Now, obviously, I can't sit in a sukkah unless I build a sukkah. I got to put the schach on top. I got to put up the walls. Right? That's what I've got to do. I've got to build the sukkah. That's the idea, right? I got to build the sukkah. That's a hechsher mitzvah, right? That will allow me to go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. But there's no mitzvah of building the sukkah. Yet the Yerushalmi, and again, we don't hold this way, would say that the hechsher mitzvah is of such importance that we actually go ahead and make a bracha on the building of the sukkah. Another one, we've discussed on a number of occasions that there's an obligation to wash one's hands. This is directly in relation to the Kohanim washing their hands and their feet in the Mishkan. We have to wash our hands when we go ahead and before we pray. Now, there's no the act of washing your hands is not an avoda. There's no service involved, right? That's not what's happening here. But it's getting me ready. It's a hechsher getting me ready for prayer, and baking matzos, right? There's no mitzvah of baking matzos, right? But I can't eat matzah on Pesach unless I bake the matzos. So that's another idea of getting us ready. Now, these things might seem secondary, and because they're secondary, they might seem of lesser importance. But in truth, that's not correct. It's not correct in and of itself. The actions that we take in order to set ourselves up properly for a mitzvah have importance in themselves, and that's important to recognize. The Sforno does differentiate, and we differentiate halachically by making a bracha and not making a bracha, between the actual mitzvah and something of secondary importance. It's true. We do see that. But at the same time, right, one is primary, one is secondary, but we shouldn't think that they take on less importance. They do take less importance. We shouldn't think that they are unimportant, because in and of themselves, the hechsher mitzvah has importance, right? Baking matzah in and of itself, although it's only a hechsher, does get us ready and it demonstrates our freedom. Building a sukkah allows us to sit in that sukkah, and washing our hands gets us ready and tells us there's a difference between what I'm doing right now, meaning just being a mundane person, and before I stand up in front of God. How do I switch my mindset? By washing my hands. So although these are of secondary importance and they're not of primary importance, the hechsher, the thing that allows me to get there, is also of importance. Now what I would like you to do is send me answers, like we've said, numbered, on the following questions. Question number 1, and I'm not going to wait after each one for you to write down the question. I'll allow you to pause the video. What is a hechsher mitzvah? I'd like you to send me an answer to what is a hechsher mitzvah. I'd like you to list. Number 1, a hechsher mitzvah is the following. Number 2, practically, what's the difference between a hechsher mitzvah and a mitzvah? We've listed an example from the Yerushalmi of what the difference is. I'd like you to, number 2, the difference between a hechsher mitzvah and a mitzvah is the following. And number 3, what's the message of this drasha? What did you get out of this? More so than just the practical of looking at something and saying that it's that they make a bracha, you don't make a bracha, but really, What's the message that you derive from this idea that things that allow us to get ready are also of importance? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Number 3, the lesson I got out of this Dvar Torah is the following. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of our videos. Now, what I would like you to do is, I'd like you to send me all these answers. You should have sent them to me by the end of the class. Okay, have a great Shabbos, everybody. I miss you tremendously. All the best.